So hello everyone and welcome to our event today. We're going to be talking about turning your passions into prose. Chris promised some One Direction chat, but we can't hear you yet, Chris. He'll mime One Direction stuff. So before I introduce Chris, lots of you will know Chris. He's written reports since we started at Bite the Book, has been with us since the beginning. So it's lovely having him here. And he's a very good writer. So that's another reason to want to talk to him. We're going to change the format slightly this week to how we usually do events. So if you've got any questions as we go along, please do put them into the chat. And we'll try and get them. We want it to be a nice interactive discussion. Brad is just saying he can only stay for 30 minutes. That's okay, Brad. I hope you'll get a recording of this as well, so you'll be able to catch up afterwards. We've got loads of upcoming events coming up, and I'll put links to them in the chat. We've got a agent tables next week. Sorry, I can't put them. Actually, maybe Stella, could you take the links from the document and put them into the chat? I can't do that at the moment. So yeah, we've got lots of events coming up. So the agent tables next week is full up, but we have one on the 13th of May as well. Kim is just joining us. That's brilliant. And we've got Bike Confluence is still on early bird at the moment, so please do sign up for that. It's only £50 to join. We've got some brilliant speakers. Lawrence is coming. We've got some latecomers coming in. That's okay. And we are doing some workshops. Kelly Weeks is doing some workshops on how to promote yourself on social media and how to use social media well. Stella, there's some links. I've got a list of all the links in the document I sent to you. You can't see it. Don't worry. I'll get to it in a minute. And we are also doing the chocolate workshop that Kat talked about in our Bike Connects the other night. So please do sign up for that. You get an amazing box of chocolate sent to you, and you'll be using the senses to help your creativity. Also, Rachel's going to be doing an event, Rachel Mann, on the 5th of May on writing practice, getting your creative juices flowing. And the idea is that we'll be running some exercises, but we're going to start introducing this idea. Tim suggested that he wanted to do some pair mentoring, and we'd like to try and do that. So we're going to be doing that as part of the event with Rachel. But we'll explain that later on. So now I'd like to introduce Chris. Chris, as lots of you will know, is a novelist about a girl, and his series About a Girl, but he's also a rock musician. He's in a band called Light Years. His debut song About a Girl was published by Hodder, and he has sold in multiple territories across the world. It's a YA book. He's also toured across 4 continents with his band and has appeared at places like Wembley Stadium and Glastonbury. Zoella's book club had him as a friend in 2017, and his writings described as terrifyingly truthful by The Guardian. Now, he secured his very first book deal at Bite the Book with Red Button, and then was subsequently signed by an agent after that. So it works. And it's good to have him here. So welcome, Chris. Lovely to meet you. I've unmuted you.
Yes.
I think. Yes. Hello. So we wanted to start today by giving everybody an exercise. Now, this isn't necessarily to share in the group. Do you want to just let people know what we'd like them to do, Chris?
Yeah, so we thought we would start just to kind of get juices flowing by just having everyone write down a list of everything they love, which sounds kind of general, but it is. But it's like a list of your passions, the things that kind of get you going, because that's mainly what we're going to be talking about today. Justine, do we think we just kind of just have a few minutes for this?
Yeah, I just think a couple of minutes. So I'll let you. I'll tell you in 2 minutes' time to stop.
Okay, go.
Go. Okay, we'll just leave it there now. I hope everyone's got some passionate things written down.
Have you done this, Justine? Did you do it yourself?
No, did you?
I did it earlier, just out of interest, and I was kind of slightly dismayed to find that like half of my things were alcoholic beverages. It's just like a list of all the drinks I like.
So rather than saying drink, it was specifically
Yes.
What are your favourite drinks, Chris?
Well, so I had whiskey sours, red wine, and champagne, probably. I mean, I could have just put, I'm not passionate about all alcohol. I should probably add that, but those specific things.
Okay, and we all have to know that it's Chris's birthday soon. So if you would like to send him his it's a big birthday for you.
It's a big one, yeah.
Yeah.
Big one. It does send me into a new category for getting the vaccine though, so that's quite exciting.
Yeah, that's good in time. Okay, yeah. So my first question, apart from alcohol, although alcohol is obviously maybe does help, how have your passions informed your writing?
So I mean, probably the main thing, unsurprisingly, is music has been probably the biggest sort of single driver in my life, which obviously from my introduction everyone will have figured out. Without sort of boring you all with my entire backstory, the bare bones of it is that I met a guy when I was about 13 or 14 who became my best friend, and we were obsessed with Bon Jovi. So we formed a band to try and become Bon Jovi. And we did that through school. And then after school, we sort of turned professional and we started performing around the world. And whenever we went to a new territory or a new country, I would write a sort of tour diary or like a blog for our website to kind of chronicle our various like mishaps and adventures. And after a period of years, we'd sort of built up this kind of vault of like sort of rock and roll anecdotes. And George sort of one day turned to me and said, "I think you should write a novel about me," which was kind of a joke, but I have this like history of doing whatever mad thing George suggested. So I did it. So I wrote a book. And that first novel was Mock Stars. And the point at which I finished that book was sort of where I turned up and buy the book.
Right.
Mock Stars was kind of, as I think a lot of first novels are, a sort of thinly veiled pseudo memoir that like, it reads as fiction, but it's sprinkled with truths based on things that I'd experienced. But then when I started working on Songs About a Girl, I think I'd been writing for long enough that I was able to step back a little bit from my own life and kind of extrapolate my passion for music outwards into a more universal story that involved, where the lead character, teenage girl, and then you've got this world famous boy band. So that had a sort of more of a universal appeal because I was able to kind of take the things I loved about music, but I didn't have to feel like I was writing about myself.
Yeah.
So music has been the thing that has been there all the way through. But I think in a way, it's like a kind of umbrella term for a whole load of other things which are important and meaningful to me, like family and creativity and storytelling. And actually, the thing I was thinking about this, about what it was that sort of drove me to write Songs About a Girl, that specific story. And one of the main things was, and I'd be really intrigued to know what other people think about this, because I think it's probably a reasonably universal experience, is the connection between music and memory. So right. I have this thing, I think if I was a neuroscientist, which I am definitely not, if I was, I would want to look into what happens in the brain when you hear a song from your childhood, but not just any song, but like one of the songs that has kind of sunk into your bones from being something like your parents played in the car. So I don't know whether kids these days have that experience because they all have their own devices. But when we were kids, you got in the car and you would listen to whatever your parents.
There was shared experiences music when we were kids, because the Walkman. I mean, I'm 50 this year, so a bit older. In my youth, Walkmans did come out, but most of the time we listened to music as a family. The house, like the radio was on, or you were in a car, or. So you're all listening together. I should have said before, if anybody wants to write down the things that came up on their list, please do put them in the chat. I'm quite interested to see the kind of things. So yeah, music does things to you, doesn't it? It kind of.
It does, and I just find it's that particular brand of like. So for me, it's Phil Collins, like post Genesis, solo era. Like, in fact, it's a particular album, but seriously, I must have been a particular age when that album came out. My mum loved the album, so we listened to it over and over again. And something about like falling asleep in the back of a car on a long car journey with the kind of motorway lights flashing past, like when I hear those songs, it does something
Can I
in
have
my bones.
I have a specific song here, please?
Do you know that album?
In the Air Tonight. Yeah, of course I do.
So, so there's a song on that, I don't know, I'm trying to remember the names of the songs. There's a song on that album called Throwing It All Away, which is it's not even, it wasn't even necessarily a single. For some reason, that song, I don't know why, it's something.
The lyrics do it, to like, if you just know the words to everything, can you?
It's just, yeah, it's that feeling like I can love a song, I can listen to a new song now and love it and have a particular relationship with it, but it will never be the same. In the same way people say, people who've known you since childhood know you in a different way to anyone you met later, and so you have a very particular kind of friendship. That's what I feel like I have with those songs. I have this like lifelong friendship, and when I hear those tones and those lyrics, and it just does something in it feels like it's in my brain, but I don't know whether.
So Anne is saying that she writes to music depending on her emotion. Do you create playlists when you're writing?
Yes, that's something that I don't listen whilst I'm writing, because it distracts me, but I pretty much with every book I will start with, part of the development process will be coming up with a playlist which will be made up of either songs that I think perhaps match the tone of the book I'm trying to write, or maybe a song that I might think a character in the book would like, or that sums up a character in the book. And I did that with Songs About a Girl, and actually I tried to bake this idea of music and memory into that story. So the lead character has a kind of obsession with cats in the cradle, because she knows it has some significance with her childhood, but she can't quite put her finger on it, and it's part of the mystery of the story. But yeah, I think probably most authors, I would imagine most people here probably do a similar thing. You curate a playlist at the beginning to kind of set the mood.
And maybe you listen to the playlist when you're not working, like when you're running, or you're outside, and you just have it going, and you're trying to conjure up a feeling and keep that kind of, so you're still in that world even when you're not writing it.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about music. I mean, Phil Collins isn't necessarily the most popular choice of
he's a bit of a divisive figure, isn't he?
With Tim Preston is saying Tony Banks hated Phil Collins' success, and there was no loyalty amongst the bandmates. So we're not in Genesis. So I think your band's a bit friendlier than that. But I wanted to ask you about your obsession with One Direction. And
I was thinking earlier about how promising One Direction chat might be like intriguing only to one person here, and that might just be me. But
Cody isn't here. She's just moved house today, I think. But she had a Harry Styles cutout in her bedroom.
Oh right, okay, that beats me.
Yeah, she would have liked this chat. I'll make sure we send a recording. But so talk to us about One Direction.
So when I was before I wrote Songs About a Girl, I was doing quite a lot of sort of freelance jobs, like temporary freelance jobs that I picked up on websites like Elance and there's now Upwork and People Per Hour, things that people probably on here have probably used before, where you pick up these short-term jobs and you apply for them online based on a description given by the client. And I applied for a job one day that it was quite, the description was a little bit vague. It said, we're looking for someone to write gossip updates for a fan site for a popular British band. And I thought, well, that sounds like something that I'm qualified to do. So I applied for it, and they ended up offering me the job, but they sort of did it with a sort of caveat, which was, we want to just check before you say yes that you're happy to write about the band. And then at that point they revealed it's One Direction, which I now think probably they left out of the description because they thought it might put people off like the job. But I thought, great, well, I mean, I had obviously heard of One Direction, and I'd always thought that's a well put together pop band, but I was clearly not in the demographic, so I'd never really considered them as a band I might like. It was just they're a band who existed. So I then had this job where it was a fan site for One Direction. So we're talking like primarily teenagers using it, and my job was to just trawl the internet every day, like hoovering up all the kind of morsels of gossip about One Direction. So, which like supermodel Liam was dating that week, and whether Harry had a haircut, and like like which two members of the band are possibly maybe secretly dating and all that kind of stuff. And then I put the stories on the website, and then the fans would respond, and then it was my job to kind of nurture that engagement so that the person running the fan site, somewhere in Australia, could, I don't know, sell advertising. I can't even remember what the business model was, but what happened after about 3 or 4 days was I woke up one morning and went, good Lord, I'm a directioner now. Like, it was almost like that sort of Stockholm syndrome thing. Like I was so saturated in the world of One Direction that I sort of couldn't help but fall in love with them. Because I knew in the way that you do when you're 14, like I knew everything about them. I knew all their like surnames and what jobs they'd done at school. And not only that, but I would kind of, it was my job to think like a 14-year-old One Direction fan. And so I'd started to kind of inhabit that space, but at the same time was developing a genuine affection for, you know, for the band. So then, well, the first thing I thought was obviously there is a novel in this. And actually the song's about a girl. It starts with a sort of fan blog. It's one of the kind of elements of the story. And I feel like I was able to bring a level of authenticity to that because I had actually become a fan, which is not something I would ever have predicted, particularly not like when I was in my 30s at the time. You know.
Do you think you need to be passionate about something in order to write a book?
That's a really good question. I don't think you need to be like I don't think you have to be, or you have to be a passionate person per se to write books, but I think you need some kind of drive to get you through the process of writing a novel, because it's so arduous and it's so long. And I think probably passion is probably one of the best drivers that there is.
Can you hate something with a passion? Maybe that can get you through a book.
I've never considered that. A sort of hate writing.
I'm sure there are plenty of books that have been written in that.
That's really interesting. I obviously have never really thought in those terms. I mean, I bet that would make a fantastic book because it's just a different kind of passion, isn't it? It's like a vitriol. But I do think you have to be, so you have to be in some level a fan of something, or you have to be obsessed with it in some way to just propel you through that process, because it's, you know, we all know that it's so easy to give up writing a novel.
So Fran, I was listening to Fran Lebowitz. I don't know, Stella was the one that told me to watch it. Pretend It's a City. Fantastic. She's an American humorist. And in that, she talks about what kind of books she likes, what gets her to carry on reading books. And she says, books that I can't forget. So if a book takes more than a couple of days for her to read it, then she's not engaged in it. And I think as a writer, you have to also, it must be the thing it's the only thing you can think about to some extent, or kind of it takes over your life a bit. It has to take over your life a bit. So you should do something about something you really care about. It's
almost like it has to like soak into your brain, so that all the time, even when you're not writing, a little part of you is like thinking about it, because it's such an unwieldy thing, a novel, that you have to have this kind of this sort of macro view of it. And I think if on some level you're always thinking about this thing, then that keeps the kind of the cogs turning all the time, and it keeps that momentum going, which is, you know.
And a question I had before, Chris, was what's the difference between passion and obsession? But I think in this context they're the same, aren't they? Or
maybe I thought about this and I wondered whether the difference is in like action. So you can be obsessed with something and that's quite inward, that's kind of in your head. And I feel like maybe the moment that it becomes a passion is when you do something about it and it kind of goes outward. So it's like the difference between listening to Gardener's Question Time every week and actually going out and tending a garden for hours and creating something that is then in the outside world in some way. So like I am really obsessed with sharks, but I wouldn't want to swim with them.
But you might want to write about them.
I might do, yeah.
Tim's one of his characters. Is he still here? Oh, he said he was. Oh no, I can't see him anymore. His book is underwater, but I can't see him anymore. So maybe he's gone for a swim.
Is that Tim saying that he's also obsessed?
No, I'm here.
Yeah. Hang on, got you going to say you're also obsessed with sharks.
Big time. But I do swim with them. I seek them out. I go on trips specifically for shark diving encounters.
Tell me about that. I'm really.
You're never more alive than when a tiger shark is a couple of feet away from you. It's highly stimulating. Let's put it that way. But every part of your body is saying, "Get the hell away from here."
Yeah.
But they're just so beautiful. The best ever encounter was a bunch of great hammerhead sharks, and a German dive instructor. She just said she was very, very sick. She's like, go 4 meters, negative entry, down to 40 meters, and then none of you make any noise whatsoever. I'm going to start singing. I'm like, what? And so she sang, and about a dozen sharks came up, and we ended up in a cone in the middle, just 4 of us, 12 huge sharks just swimming around us. It was amazing, really wonderful.
Wow.
That's extraordinary.
I'm gonna mute you now, but that's an amazing story. Thank you, Tim, and thanks for contributing. Like, if anybody wants to say anything, rather than just listen to us talk. I mean, Chris is fascinating, and it is an interesting topic, I think. But we do want to hear from other people if they want to add anything. So do put stuff into the chat. How do you keep passionate about a subject when you're writing about it every day? Don't you end up, just don't talk to me about One Direction. don't talk to me about don't talk to me about that, because I can't. It's too much.
Funnily enough, I never reached that stage with 1D. It never happened. I feel quite lucky because I don't feel like I've reached a point where I've reached a saturation point with any of the subjects that I've written about. But I know I know what it's like to kind of get to a point with a say a particular draft of a book, and to be in that kind of middle part of it and go. I mean, we all do this where you question it. You go, oh, is this even any good? Like, can I write? And what am I doing? And I think at those moments it's always really good to sort of go back to the beginning and remind yourself of where it started. So the thing we were just talking about Spotify playlists, if I've got, say, 5 or 6 songs which kind of fire me up about a book, if I get to that point, the lag, I might go out for a walk and listen to the songs. And the music is so kind of immediate and sort of like it's a gut punch, and it reminds you of that kernel of passion and why you started something in the first place.
I mean, maybe it's about not overworking, isn't it? So having time where you aren't working and you can still be thinking about it, but don't kill the passion. It's like if you get too obsessed with a person, you see too much of them, you can start seeing their faults. So you need to keep, because it's a long distance sprint. How long does it take you to write a book, Chris? That wasn't on the list of questions, but it
wasn't
interesting.
Well, I suppose a draft normally takes a few months. It's probably
how many words do you do a day?
I've never worked. I don't know why. I don't know whether it's fear of not meeting the targets, but so I've never thought in those terms. I might have an idea of like, I'd like to get to the end of the seam at the end of the day, but I've never really sort of kept an eye on word counts.
Okay.
I've never certainly had I must do X number of words a day, even though I can definitely see the value in that. I think if you're a target driven person, then that's probably really useful. Whereas I tend to find getting in the zone reasonably straightforward.
Yeah.
But my problem with words is more, I remember writing the second book in the Songs trilogy, and it was just too long, especially for YA, which has perhaps stricter limits than adult fiction. And having to cut words out, I found it's like, taking out an organ. It's like, it's much worse than adding words, I think.
Yeah. Compassion, maybe it does to this extent in this area. Compassion get in the way of your writing. So, and how do you slow down your enthusiasm in order to write if you're really, I love this so much, it's so amazing?
I think it probably can. I think if you're like a naturally very excitable person, and you've got too many ideas, I mean, I'm quite boring. I'm like a rule follower and a planner, and I've always been someone who's like quite excited by things, but quite happy to like control my excitement. So I was thinking about this when I was a kid, and I was allowed to have like a packet of crisps in front of a TV on a Sunday night. I would be able to make the packet last a whole episode of The Vicar of Dibley by only eating 1 crisp a minute, which would really infuriate my brothers because they would finish their crisps like 3 minutes in and then have to watch me eating my crisps. So like for some reason, since I was a kid, I've always been able to like be quite sensible about it. And so when I get excited about something, part of what I'm getting excited about is the planning of it. So I kind of plan straight. In fact, I found this thing earlier that I thought, this is the clipboard that someone gave me for my wedding when I was organizing my wedding. If you're into Friends, you will know that's a Monica Geller quote. I get really excited by planning, so I'm kind of doing that as I go along. I don't see it as something which takes the fun out of the idea.
Are spreadsheets a passion killer?
Yeah, not for me. But I would be really interested to hear if anyone else works with spreadsheets and how they feel about them, because I'm sure for some people, I think if you're the kind of person who likes the idea of sitting down in front of a blank page and seeing where it takes you, then you probably wouldn't find a spreadsheet a turn on, or at least not straight away. Whereas for me, it's like the spreadsheet is kind of where the book starts to become exciting, because you can stand back from it and watch it kind of unfurl in front of you.
I'm please, anybody who wants to say something in the comments, please do, or if they want to add to the conversation. Someone told me to start to use slides or PowerPoint, and so I've got images that help me plan, and then I can put words on that as well, so I can put I think just putting things in line is a bit dead, but actually seeing pictures can kind of bring it alive, maybe in the same way that you have with music. Does anybody want to say anything about spreadsheets? I mean, our last conversation, Chris, was about how to organize your ideas. So we're veering over there, but I think it is important when it comes to your passions. We haven't got any comments here. I think people maybe like listening to us talk about it. We're going to get you to do another exercise soon. But what happens when you don't feel passionate about anything? Can writing help? So when you're having a bit of a tough time, I'm sure lots of people have had a bit of a weird year this year.
I haven't experienced that, so I don't know exactly how I deal with it. But I think that if I was feeling like I don't have anything that I am driving towards, anything that I'm passionate about, what can I do about it? I don't think my solution would be writing, because that feels quite insular. I think my solution would probably be more to go out in the world and visit a new place, or see some people I haven't seen in a while, or experience something new, because then you are bringing richness into your life, which then may translate into something that you are passionate about. I quite often get asked by readers, young readers, who will email me and they say, right, I've read your book and I want to be a writer, and they're like 15 or 16 or whatever, and they say, I've written a book, or I've started writing, and when do I know that I'm ready to send to publishers, and asking me questions like that. And I will quite often say to them something which I imagine on one level is quite frustrating, because I know if I was 15 it would frustrate me, but I kind of say to them, like, don't rush, or don't feel like you have to rush, because obviously the desire to write and the ability to write and the love of words is all really important, but the other element of writing a good book is having something burning to write about, and it comes from various things, but one of the things it comes from is living and experiencing things, and you can't just get that from books. So in my case, I kind of, although I've always loved writing, and I studied English, and it's always been in my life, I didn't really ever think, oh, I'll be a writer, because I'm not sure why, but because I was so focused on the band. And then I spent all this time having adventures and experiences that were effectively fodder for books. I just didn't know I didn't know it at the time. In retrospect, I went, oh, okay, actually I could write about
you followed your passion into music, and that led to another passion.
Yes, so, that's very true. And I think that's something that I certainly would not have understood that when I was 16, I was like, I want to be in Bon Jovi, and that was kind of it. And the idea that I might go and be a musician for a bit, and that might pinball me in a different direction, I don't think I would have grasped that. I would have been like, well, why would you? You're kind of one thing or the other. And I think that's one of the great beauties of life, that you might spend 10 years in something like music, and then just when you're not expecting it, something knocks you another direction, but you use the things that you've learned and that you've done in this new passion. So I think, I would think probably for me, if I woke up one day and went, God, I don't really feel anything, I don't want to write about, my instinct would be to go out and experience something that's not anything to do with books or writing.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would be. Maybe I should get in a Shark Tank. Maybe I should actually do that.
So Anne has made a comment. She's a pantser.
Yeah.
So she's a bit different from how you write. So Anne's made a comment, and also Andrew. So firstly, I wanted to go over to Anne. I've unmuted you.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about your process?
I have great difficulty planning. I have a passion, and I know the core of the story. But when I start writing, it's quite magical, and if it works, it's great. I might sit down to start on another chapter or something, and I can honestly, I have no idea where it's going to go, and I just start. And the characters seem to drive it the whole way. I never knew there was going to be a murder. I never planned a murder or a death in my book at all. But somehow it kind of just happened. So if I look at my original idea for the book, I've got a basic structure and, the 3 parts and everything. But basically, I just wrote, and the characters, because they live with me and I get to know them so well, and I usually like them or hate them or whatever, they kind of drive the whole thing. So I'm living with them the whole time. When I finished my first book, I cried because I was kind of not lost them, but I knew they were going to go into a different part of my life. So it's the characters grow within me. And everywhere I go, I might sit and look at the sea and think, oh yeah, that's an idea, or I might do something. So it's it kind of osmosis, and it's kind of just grows organically. So to plan it, actually, it would become redundant within days.
It would be a passion killer maybe for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It would kill it stone dead if I thought I've got to write this. And sometimes I get really stuck. But if I've, say, been to, I don't know, the beach, and something's occurred to me, I will sit down and write a scene about the beach and not worry what was going on. And often it feeds into the story, and the characters just grow in all their. So I wouldn't, because I don't know them terribly well to start with. So it takes a long time to know them and everything, and to realize actually how their capabilities and to what extent they will go to, and extremes. Hence the death in my novel, which I never planned. It wasn't going to be that kind of novel at all.
I was going to say, so does that mean that the genre of your novel switched, or at least you didn't decide when you started writing necessarily what genre it was going to be?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a murder or a mystery. It's a domestic drama which ended in a violence, something happening, an accident which drove so it's not. I try not to think about genre, because genre is such a difficult thing to think about, quite frankly, really impossible. So I just write, and it's not a crime thriller or anything like that. It's just a domestic drama which ends in tragedy. But it wasn't meant to end in tragedy. It was meant to end very happily. So
okay.
And I feel quite sad about it in a way, because I almost would have preferred the happy ending, but it just wasn't going to work that way with the characters. It's really, I can't really explain it. It's quite odd. I get very.
I think that's a much more romantic view of writing. I think that's probably how people.
It's romantic. It just happens, and it's just how it is. So I find it very difficult to start. You're taught to look in your hand, see what people have got in their handbags, or see what people, and work out that way what your character's going to be like. I find that almost impossible, because I don't know until I'm halfway through the book. They haven't become established. So it's very different from you.
Yeah, very.
I'm a spreadsheet woman. I've been in publishing all my life, and I love spreadsheets. They're my, the blood of publishing, as far as I'm concerned. To keep
it's nothing personal against spreadsheets. Yeah.
This has failed me completely. Yeah.
That's really fascinating. Yeah, it's hard. Half the battle of writing is figuring out what your process is, and once you've done that, you're free to then write. But yeah, I do always find it fascinating that Oh, Justine, you're muted, Justine.
Not having a plan, I think, is quite difficult for some people, but actually it can be quite freeing. It's just, and you might plan for a bit and then write, and then go between the two of them. Andrew, but it's really interesting hearing how people are doing things differently. Sorry, Anne, I've muted you now. I'm going to go over to Andrew, who had a really interesting question, I think. Andrew, do you want to say hello? And
hello. I'll keep it kind of short. So I've been writing a kind of young adult fantasy for the last, let's call it 2 years, which is almost finished. But equally, I'm planning a kind of comedy novel, and I've got a science fiction novel. So my kind of passions are kind of quite varied in a way. And I was really kind of not paranoid, but thinking I've got a sci-fi, a fantasy, a kind of Bridget Jones style diary thing here, and I'm going in all these different directions. I just wondered what you might kind of think in terms of kind of focusing and honing those passions in a
Yeah.
to make my writing, my work more kind of marketable, sellable?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And I suppose I dealt with a similar thing when I first started, where I'd written my first book, Mock Stars, is probably an adult comedy, is probably a good way of describing it. It's sort of like Spinal Tap meets The Inbetweeners. And it was very much about an indie band. And when I first met the guy who then became my agent, he said to me, I really like this book and it really does what this sort of book should do. But just so you know, it's quite niche and it's unlikely to get you a major publishing deal if that's what you want. And so at that point I had to go, well, what is it that I want at this point in my career? Do I keep banging the drum of this book that I've written with the knowledge that it's unlikely to ever bring me, say, a publishing deal with Hodder, or do I slightly change direction? And so I had the idea for Songs About a Girl had been ticking over in my head, and I knew that a sort of blockbuster trilogy about a boy band was going to be more marketable than the book I'd written. And I, at the time, wanted to go in that direction. I wanted to chase, a publishing deal. I wanted to be in Waterstones and all that kind of stuff. And so I turned away from the book that I had written. I mean, that book still was published, actually, but I kind of made that conscious decision to then write about something which had a more obvious audience.
But it was the same passion. It was still music.
It was the same passion, yeah.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, my Mock Stars was recently republished by another publisher, and I never really planned for that. But I suppose the thing with books is they have a life that is longer than your own life. So I think it's important to focus on the thing that's going to get you to where you want to be, but that doesn't mean you have to sacrifice those other things. So I'm now writing my current project is different genre, will be under a different name. And the great thing about, I think, being an author is that you can actually have 5 different hats. The important thing is just to try not to wear all those hats at once, or know which of the hats you want to wear at the moment. So I don't know whether that helps, but because I think focus is the important thing. But if, and it's focus and also knowing what your goals are.
Yeah. I think that kind of helps. I mean, what I was trying to do, because I was thinking genre is clearly not the defining thing between my writing.
Yeah.
So I kind of pinned that kind of identity. They're all very much kind of about who am I, where am I going, each kind of story with very kind of odd, quirky characters. I was thinking, okay, that's clearly an area of interest and passion. The one thing I was conscious of is having just finished this kind of young adult fantasy.
Yeah.
And suddenly thinking, oh, should I write another young adult fantasy? And that can actually kill my passion, thinking, oh, I should be writing this, when actually I'm interested in this kind of more adult comedy now.
Right. I see exactly what you're saying. And I actually have experienced kind of a similar thing where you go, it's not that you get bored of one thing, but you want a fresh challenge.
Yeah.
Now there probably are writers out there who are able to kind of market themselves in an eclectic way where their readers go, I don't care what you write. Well, I don't care what it is. I'm going to buy it, whatever it is next. But in my case, my first book came out under Christopher Russell, and my second book came out under Chris Russell. And so as far as Amazon are concerned, they're different people, although they are both me. So in sort of pure like internet, like metadata terms, they're 2 different people. And the book that I'm working on at the moment that is a different genre will also be under a pen name. So I've separated those things out because I recognize that they're different enough that and they're aimed at different audiences, and so it would benefit everyone involved for them to be separated. And that's kind of a commercial decision. But so it's sort of, it's one of these things. It's up to you, but I think it's worth figuring out what you're aiming for, and what makes you tick at the moment. And it's like I say, you can have lots of hats, you just can't wear them all at the same time, basically.
So I've thank you for that question, Andrew. I've muted you, but I think that's an interesting answer. Rachel had a question for you as well. I've unmuted her.
Rachel as well.
I was just wondering, are you a songwriter as well? And if so, are there any similarities to going about writing a song and writing a book or a novel, or is it completely different?
Yeah, that is a really good question. I'm a songwriter. so the whole story of my life sort of began with wanting to write songs, and I in my head at least, they're completely different, because I would never write a set of lyrics and then put them to music. I do those things at the same time. And writing a song to me feels 10 times more mysterious than writing prose. It feels somehow primal. Like I don't really understand it. And I feel like with songwriting, it's a numbers game. Like unless you are a pure genius, you have to write 200 songs to get like 3 good ones. And even like ABBA, the famous story about ABBA is that they were like, they said we were never great songwriters. We just spent 40 or 60 hours a week writing, and eventually you're going to write some good ones. For me, writing prose is slightly different. I find it more methodical. I find it easier to understand, and that might just be me. It might just be the way my brain works. But there's something about getting music and words to work together that is like a weird alchemy that even people who know about songwriting will say. But at the end of the day, you just don't know what's going to be a great song until you hear it, and you can't. Whereas to me, writing prose is somehow more tangible, and I'm not sure why that is.
Yeah, because I write, but I could never conceive of writing a song. Like it just seems so alien.
Are you a musician?
No.
Yes, I mean, because the interesting about lyrics, of course, is that some people do. I mean, there are songwriters like Elton John and Bernie Taupin who actually their whole dynamic is one writes the words and one writes the music. And I'm sure that there are plenty of songwriters who do write them separately. But I've never been able to do that because everyone knows that lyrics on their own rarely work. Sometimes they do, but most of the time they just sound a bit. They fall flat because they are missing half of what makes them work, which is the music. So there's something about finding the point that those two things meet that's very elusive. I think and it's also magical. Like when if you're writing a song and you write something that's really good, you almost feel like I have to grab that and put it in a jar before I forget it because it's so elusive. And there's that whole thing about Paul McCartney dreaming yesterday, the melodies yesterday. It's very like, it feels to me more like divine inspiration with a small d. Whereas writing
it's quicker though, isn't it? The song is quicker.
Well,
like because writing a novel, you might have some divine inspiration, but you've got to work quite hard to get to the end of it.
Yeah, I would probably compare a novel to an album and a song to a chapter. But still, you can write a great song in 2 minutes if you're Paul McCartney. And a great song can almost come out fully formed, I think. Whereas it's rare for writing, for prose to come out fully formed the first time. Although I'm sure Shakespeare could do it. But like that, so to me they feel completely different. And the fact that writing songs involves words. Although that said, I do think that being a writer has improved my songwriting from the point of view that it's forced me to think about the way I use words in songs much more intelligently than I think I probably did before. But even that, sometimes songwriting is better if you just run on instinct. Like there's that line in Hey Jude, the movement you need is on your shoulder. And it's like, that doesn't really make sense. If you put that in a book, your editor would probably say, I don't know what that means. And then when was it, I can't remember if it was Paul or John who wrote, I think it was Paul. It was Paul, yeah. No, it was John. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Whoever wrote it said, I don't know what it means. And I know it's not really a thing, but that doesn't matter in a song for some reason, because the music is doing some of the work. Whereas I feel like writing prose is more precise, but I don't know.
Thank you, Rachel. That's a great question. Chris, we've
Paul
got
wrote it about Julian Lennon. Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Paul wrote it about, right,
okay. Timbo knows. Timbo knows about music. Or he's Googling quite hard as you're talking. No, he's not Googling. Okay, so we were going to do, thanks, Rachel. It's an interesting question, especially interesting to ask Chris. We've got another writing exercise, and you don't feel as though you have to share at the end, but if we've got some time, we might ask you to. Chris, do you want to talk about what we thought we'd do now?
Yes, so we thought we'd get everyone to write a paragraph about a moment in your life when you discovered one of your passions.
So I'm going to give you 5 minutes to do this, and then we'll have a little time at the end if anybody wants to read it or we've got any final questions. So I'll pause the recording. Okay, just finish the sentence you're writing at the moment. And I'll stop you there. Okay, everybody, how did that go? Was it fun? Yeah, George is smiling. Does anyone want to read out their paragraph? George, you're smiling.
George is always smiling.
George is always smiling. We know this about him. He's quite new to Bite the Book, but he's a smiler.
I'm happy to share if I can't promise it's any good. Actually, I ended up writing about not having one of my passions at a particular time. So coffee is now one of my favorite things. But when I was 16, like fresh with my, just got my driver's license, I worked in one of the Starbuckses that was like a kiosk inside one of the local bookstores. And, I spent, my entire shifts pulling espresso shots. I had, the full menu of any drink I wanted, and yet I did not like the taste of coffee yet. I was surrounded by the scent all day. I did love that smell, but I didn't enjoy the taste. And I don't think it was probably until I went off to university in New York. And I feel like, I can't remember that first cup of coffee that changed everything for me. But it was probably, something I do remember is just ending up at a greasy spoon diner with a terrible hangover from, some Thursday night.
Did you write anything, George?
Sorry?
Did you write something?
Yes, sorry. I'm riffing off of it, actually.
I'm going to ask, Perry said that she was in Hot Gossip and she started performing crowds. And I want to know if she wrote about that. But,
oh my God, I'd love to hear that.
I know. George, if you want to have a bit of it, go on, just a couple of minutes, let us know, or a couple of lines from it.
Sure. I can't remember a singular cup that changed that. Perhaps it was a burnt cup and a chip mug from a Greasy Spoon diner in the East Village after spending another Thursday knocking back G&Ts until 4 a.m. But it was the ritual, the return to making the cup every morning that, where I found my love for it again.
I love that. It's really nice.
Good. Thank you, George. Does anyone else want to share? Perry, do you want to talk about Hot Gossip?
I want to hear about Hot Gossip.
I know, we all want to hear about Hot Gossip.
Oh.
I'm asking you to, I've unmuted you. We might not be able to. I've asked to unmute.
Okay. When I was 5 years old, I went to the Royal Ballet School, and it was so regimented and strict. And the teachers used to come and slap you on the back of the legs if your feet weren't turned out perfectly and all that kind of crap. So I hated actual ballet, even though I loved to dance freestyle on my own. But then when I got into Hot Gossip and it was all about, being very free and sexy and whatever you wanted to be, really. And especially the guys and the girls in Hot Gossip, we picked a lot of the music that we actually ended up dancing to. Like, we were all big Devo fans, and we had, we danced to Whip It. And so the first time I went out on stage, not the first time, but, one of the, the first few months of being in Hot Gossip and performing live cabaret, we were performing in this huge venue. And you never really see the audience because the bright lights are in your face. But at the very end of the show, they turned the lights out into the audience. And I remember being absolutely flabbergasted at seeing all these people, going, yay, and clapping and going crazy. And I thought, wow, this is it. This is what I want in life, is just to make people go, yay. So that was a big moment for me, I guess. Soon wore off after all the traveling on horrible coaches, trying to sleep, and for 4 hours on the way from Birmingham night out to Glasgow or somewhere, and eating greasy food in horrible restaurants, and all the hours of rehearsing, and so the novelty wore off after a while, but it was great for a while.
It's a common experience, that strange thing of being on stage where the lights are so bright that you can't see the people who are all looking at you.
Yeah.
And then if the lights turn around and you're like, oh, okay, I didn't realize I was in this room with all these people.
Yeah, a couple of us danced with the Tubes. There was a big group called the Tubes. They did a song called White Punks on Dope. That was their big hit. Anyway, they had an amazing live show. The lead singer used to get fired out of a cannon into the audience, into a net. I mean, it was insane. And so when they came to England, they wanted dancers, and they picked a couple of us from Hot Gossip to go on tour, and it was fantastic fun. I mean, we did things like we would pretend to throw a hand grenade onto the other side of the stage, and then the pyrotechnic guy did all these explosions. So it was like being in a real war for a minute, even though we were wearing point shoes.
Have you written about it, Perry?
Eh?
Did you write about it then, or have you written a book about it at all?
I've written about it in my book, yes, but it's a bit hard to describe the feeling. I mean, yes, it's, you can describe.
We do have an agent on this in this group, by the way. She's got her camera off, but do you have an agent? What's happened?
Well, that's a bit of a long story, and I don't really want to go into it. I've kind of got an agent, but I don't know, they've been a bit slacking. Then now I've got some guy in New York who's kind of interested, but I don't really know what's going on. I'm a bit like, I feel like I've been banging my head against a brick wall for the last year and nothing seems to have happened, but I don't know, maybe something will happen soon. I don't know. I still have faith. I'm an optimist and I haven't given up completely, but I feel a little bit battered.
Oh, it's keep going. It's a great story, and you're passionate, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
I'm gonna mute you now. Unfortunately, it's a shame we've just gone over the hour. Chris, do you want to respond to Perry at all, or generally to us anything to sum up about passion and writing?
I think it's lovely to be able to pinpoint a particular moment where a passion started. It's quite amazing to be able to look back in your life and go, wow, that second, put me on a particular path.
Like from George with coffee and changing
the coffee story made me think of like my late grandfather. My mum was from Derbyshire, my dad was from Scotland, so we would go and drive to my Scottish family's place, and on the way up we would stop for like a big breakfast in Derbyshire, and my grandfather loved black coffee, and the smell of black coffee, it obviously was inculcated in me early, because that just makes me think of my grandfather. Now I drink black coffee, and maybe those two things are related. It's like a way of kind of re-experiencing that same moment over and over again.
Yeah, great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you especially to Chris. It's really interesting hearing. I think everybody has enjoyed it. I'm going to stop the recording soon, but we could all just say thank you, Chris, for being so.
Thank you, and thanks for your contributions. And
everyone, thanks for contributing. We'll send a recording through. I hope you found it interesting and useful, and that you live a passionate day today and do lots of fun things. And I know it's a bit weird at the moment, but there's still passions. There's plenty of passions going on. So I'm going to stop the recording.